Hello everyone, my name is Wolfgang and today I want to show you how to develop infrared pictures with Capture One with the mask tooling. The pictures you will see today I made last year on a short trip to the Blackwood Forest, and I'm using a Sony Alpha A2 that is modified to a full spectrum camera, and I used a 720 nanometer filter, and I used an old Minolta lens that goes from 28 to 85 millimeter because it creates absolute no hotspot. Okay, so you see here the program opened already. On the left side is a gallery, in the middle is a picture I want to work with, and on the right is a tooling I want to use. There is the layer tooling, then I'm using the white balance tooling, the level tooling, exposure, I use a high dynamic range tooling, the clarity and sharpening tooling. I normally start by doing a white balance first, so I click here on the right on the white balance picker and I move it over to the picture, and then I click somewhere in the picture. It does not matter where in the picture you click, it's just important that you create two different colors. So I clicked here in the sky, and in the vegetation you can see it's some kind of bluish, and the sky has some color I don't really have the English words for. If I click into the vegetation as an example, you see the vegetation is now grayish and the sky is some kind of brownish. That as a starter. Then I go over to the layer tooling and I click on the magic brush. I move over the picture, and now I show you a little bit about the magic brush. With the right mouse click, you open a little toolbox. You can set the size. To the right it gets bigger, to the left it gets smaller. You can choose the opacity, so how much how intense the mask will be. Then you have the tolerance, that is how wide is the spectrum of colors you want to pick with the magic brush. And then there is a refining edge, and it really doesn't matter where you put it. You can do that always later again. I normally have here middle setting. And, and I click off here the magic erasure with magic brush. Okay, now I've set my brush, then I click on my keyboard and you see where the mask is already, and now I can move down and you can see how the program is extending the mask until I reach here the vegetation, and I see is a little bit in the vegetation, a little bit of sky what is not completely masked. I've done it now, and here you have now the sky nicely masked. Then I go here to the right to the layer tooling again. I click on the plus, that creates automatically a second mask. I'm here already in the magic brush again, and then I just go over the vegetation and the machine is creating the mask. I can keep it this way and I can create a third mask. And I take here the dark area, you can see that here, and it creates a third mask, or I skip that and I take the second mask and I go down here into the corner in the dark area, and then I capture the whole vegetation. Now I have captured the masks. I go into the development, so I click on my keyboard on the M. The masking looks disappeared, and now I can choose the first mask, the sky, and I start coloring. And I do coloring with a white balance tool, and if I want to have a blue color, I put the slider to the left and the sky is blue. If I want to have a yellow sky, I turn it to the right. I have a yellow sky, and then with the exposure I can make it a little bit lighter, more yellowish. I do it backwards. If I want to have pink, I take the tint slider to the right. And if I want to have red, I go to the Kelvin slider and put it also to the right. And you see I have the red color. I go back. Oop. Here. If I want to have green, I need the level tooling. And I go here to the right side and I pull this one to the left. And you see I get green. And now can do mix of the colors by going, let's say, here this way. It goes direction of grayish pinkish. Can go back. I can go back here. I can create pink again by using this one. And then I can influence the pink, make it a little bit more bluish. More bluish. Going to the right, it gets pink blue, and you can see it's a little bit darker here, a little bit lighter here. And I can do that with a second mask. Again, I can have green vegetation. Or backwards, I can have yellow vegetation. I can have red vegetation. And you can see how easy it is to do the development with mask mode. Let's say I keep it this way, then I go to the background, and then I go to the height dynamic range. Maybe I take a little bit of the highlights away. I increase the contrast. I do that because this Minolta lens is old and it's not really very, very sharp and very high on contrast. I add here a little bit of clarity and I add a little bit of sharpening. And now I could say, I like this picture. Now I do a little bit more. I create another mask. And then I go here to a branch. I go a little bit over the branch. And then I just reduce the exposure. And you can see by doing that one, the shadow, darker areas get darker and I get much more contrast in the picture. I can reverse it, as I can always do that with Capture One, and here would have made my first picture. So the first picture is done. I do the second picture. You remember I took the white balance tooling, I click here, I go into the picture, this time in the vegetation, then I take the magic brush, I have the same settings, I go here into the sky, and now I have to click M on the keyboard again to see where my sky is, and I see here's a little bit of brownish color, here's a little bit of brownish color, and now I can see I've got here the clouds. I would like to keep the clouds. What I then normally do, I go to the adjustment layer, I take the right mouse click, and then I refine the mask. So you get here a slider, and you also get a preview, and dependent where you pull the slider, you can see here the edges are quite hard, or I go complete to the right, and they get quite soft. I apply this one. I create another mask by clicking the plus. I go to the cloud here a little bit. Oop. Now I get the cloud and then I make it a little bit lighter. I click on my keyboard to get the color out and now go to the first mask. I make myself a blue sky. I go to the second mask and I still make it a little bit lighter, and maybe I take the white balance go into the mask, and now I have quite nice white clouds in my blue sky. Now I make me another mask. I go to the vegetation. I go a little bit in the vegetation, and now I do a yellow coloring. You remember it's a Kelvin slider, and I go to the right. Well, that's okay, but I make it a little bit lighter for me. Now I can keep it that way. I go again into the mask mode. I create myself another mask here in this area. And I can make it now a little bit red. And you remember red is Kelvin to the right and time to the right. And now I have a picture with 4 masks. One for the cloud, then for the light vegetation and for the dark vegetation. I can enlarge this mask here a little bit more. I make it a little bit more open. I go here into the vegetation, here a little bit. And now you see the reason why I only use the smallest setting for the size, because then I can go into these fine structures. I can do it here a little bit more. And here I made now a little bit too much. Then I take the eraser tool, make it a little bit bigger, and I erase the mask for my cloud. So this is one way, or I take the mask, the magic eraser, and I go here into that little corner, go over it, and that normally works very nicely that it takes a color away. Then I go again into the background. I increase my contrast. I increase my clarity, and I add some sharpening. And here I finished the second picture with 4 masks. So I've made now 2 pictures. I will use another one. I just take any one. I take this one here, and I do what I done before. I pick here my magic brush. I go to the white balance tool. I click somewhere in the picture. Then I take the masking tool. I go into the sky, and now I decide to do a yellow sky. I see here it's yellow. I go down here, and you see how nicely this tool and how intelligent this tool is to create me a nice mask. And now I create another mask. I go into the vegetation and I make it blue. And often you have then here this dark grayish area that actually fits quite nicely. So I finish this picture by increasing contrast, clarity, and sharpening, and the next picture is done. So now I take the last picture, let's say this one, and it will be the same story. So I take the white balance, I click in the vegetation, and now I will make a very traditional picture, what you normally see often as infrared development. I take the mask tool, the magic brush, I make my sky blue, here, so it's done. So I think that's pretty well done. Then I take a second mask, I go into the vegetation and go a little bit over the vegetation, here a little bit, and now I increase brightness, maybe here a little bit more, okay, here a little bit more, and it's nice and bright, it looks like winter, and I create a third mask. I go here to the branches, And I reduce a little bit the exposure to get more contrast into the picture. I can do it here again. So, and then I go to the background. I increase the contrast. I increase clarity and sharpening. And here maybe I do have to take a little bit of the very hard brightness away. Yeah. And I have a very traditional infrared picture, and that's it for the moment. So I recap: white balance, creating mask, color the mask, and then dependent what lens you use. If you use an old one like me, you have to increase contrast, clarity, and sharpening, what you normally also do with your pictures, and that's it. Thanks for listening. Have a nice day.